Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of Wristwatch Wednesday. Today I want to talk about something that's really dear to me, and I always wanted to talk about this. It's the fact that a lot of people are talking about the Submariners as being their dream watch, and a lot of people don't really understand what the Submariner Red really is or how important it is to the history of the submariner in general. So the 1950s were the initiation basically of the submariner. There were no dates, no different functions other than giving you the time to the second and the revolving bezel. You have different iterations from the 6202, 6536, 5508, 6200, 6538, 5510, and then you're going into the more modern, let's say, era of the time with the 5512, 5513. For a long time they've been there for roughly around 10 years until the Submariner Red came along, and that's what we're going to talk about. It's very important to understand that this is the first iteration of the Submariner with a date. So the date function was very important for maybe a lot of people, and they integrated that. And even today, the more important Submariner out of the two available on the market, the date and the no date, the Submariner date is always the priority purchase in people's minds. They always want to have the date. The date function was very important and is still very important to a lot of consumers. Therefore, what I'm wearing today is a Submariner Red, and in this case it's a meters first. For a lot of people, especially for the 5513, a lot of people say, hey, this one is a meters first, this one is a feet first. They don't really understand what the variation really entices and what it means. For a 5513, the meters first were most of the time from the 60s up to maybe 1967, 68, around there for the regular 5513s and 5512s. The thing is, it doesn't really matter. A lot of people think because it's meters first, it's worth more. It's not the case. For the 5513s, it's mostly the maxi dials that are mid to late 70s that are going to change the value. They also made them early 80s, so any iteration of the maxi dials is important, but the early ones, we don't really make a huge fuss about the early ones or the later ones. It doesn't really change a lot. But in case of the 1680, it makes a huge fuss, and I'm gonna go with you guys through a website which is very important to understand how rare those are and how important they are on the market. There's three iterations of the meters first. So you have the Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. The Mark 1 is extremely elusive. Mark 2, which is this one, is also quite rare, and the Mark 3 as well. They were all made within, I think, 2 or 3 years maximum. Therefore, just finding one, it's extremely hard. The version that I have here is highly important in terms of condition, in terms of overall originality. The only thing that was replaced, I replaced it, was the crystal. The original one was really worn, and you do have a really nice particularity about the bracelets on those. We're gonna show it to you. So you have the patent pending bracelet, the 9315 from the time. It's very important to understand that those little details make a huge difference in how collectible a watch is. We're gonna talk about collectability and not about value, because again, value goes with the amount of collectability or interest that someone might have versus something that's beat up and something that's less rare. So you have a website here that's very important to understand the market collectability of those models. So you have the Double Red Sea Dweller website where everything is really properly described. There's very few websites out there that give so much information. So for you to understand, the Mark 1, the meters first, represent maybe around 1.5 to 2% of the total Submariner Red production. Okay, then you have the meters first, again Mark 2, Mark 3. Those represent roughly about 5, 6, 7% of the total production of the series. Then you have the feet first Mark 4, which represent about 30% to 35% of the production of all the Submariner 1680 total production throughout roughly about 10 years from 1969 until 1979 when you had the transitional period of the 1680 with the 16800. So you have a very high expectation of finding watches like those and poor to really bad condition, which is not the case with this one. This one is unpolished. The bracelet has seen better days, but it doesn't really matter. It's still it's still repairable. We can always fix those bracelets or take one that's less worn, and then we're just going to change the class. Some people do that. I prefer it as is, as I found it. It's something that's honest, that's as it was found, except the crystal, as I said. And you have the proper insert. So you have a Mark III insert, we call them. The dial and the hands have aged perfectly all together. There's no damage, scuffs, scratches, anything like that on the watch itself or on the dial. And overall, it's extremely interesting. This one also does have, if you check on the back, there's a name. I'm not going to say the name, but if you look up the name, it's someone that was part of the Canadian Army and they retired many years ago. Therefore, this was his watch. I do have the box, the papers with the watch as well, which is really interesting to have when you find watches like these ones. And overall, I'd say for me, it's maybe one of the most iconic and most important watches from the, let's say, late 60s, early 70s from Rolex. Obviously, you have the 1675, you have the 1655, and so on and so forth. But for the most part, when you're talking Submariners, which is one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic watch ever made by Rolex, you have people telling me, hey, do you have a Submariner Red? Yes, I do have multiple ones, but this is most probably one of the more interesting ones overall. And it becomes a great importance to actually own one in a collection if you really like watches. A lot of people will sell them online. I'm not going to go too much into details. Overall, you're going to see a lot of them that have been modified by Rolex in a service just because something was wrong. The insert, the dial, the hands might have been replaced back in a service. Therefore, just finding them in original state, in original condition, in unpolished state is very, very, very difficult. If you do like or you want to buy one, I'd say go on websites, read about them, do a lot of due diligence. The more you see, the better. If you do have the chance to come by the store, and I have it on my wrist, well, you'll get to see a Sub Red, what one should look like in original state. But if you do want to buy them online, I'd be telling you be cautious. If you have a proper seller who's gonna disclose everything, I wouldn't be afraid to buying. If you have a seller that's really reputable and very honest, and they tell you everything about the watch and they know its history, they're the first dealer that ever has them, so they bought it directly from the original family, I'd have no hesitation buying those before buying any other one that was mangled or that's very poorly described online. Or if you look, you're gonna see a lot of replacement parts on them, which is very sad, but at the same time it's part of their history. So if you want a cheaper one, you're gonna buy one that's, let's say, very polished, that was roughed up, maybe a much later bracelet, maybe the hands have been reloomed or they were replaced. So overall, it's going to impact the value of the watch tremendously. But if you just want a Sub Red, aim for a perfect dial. That's the most important part of the watch. And the rest, you can always replace the hands, you can always replace the inserts or the bezels. And obviously, if you want a perfect case, well, then you're gonna have to wait for one that's really pristine in terms of condition. But overall, it's one of the watches that I have been wearing since I am most probably like 16 or 17 years old. That I was lucky enough to buy one back then for really cheap. They were really a lot more affordable than today, and it was an amazing watch to wear on a daily basis. So overall, if you're really looking to buy such a watch and you're looking for collectability, a bit of, let's say, an investment, because a lot of people talk to me about investments, I go ahead and try and find the best one possible out there for the means you have. Obviously, if you don't have the means to buy one with box and papers, I would just go more for something that's in very good condition than something that's with bumps and papers overall. And I would say if you have the chance, try to buy one whenever you can, as I'd say in the past 15-20 years, they have been just going up and up and up, and good examples are more and more hard to find. And I do think I did check on Chrono24 this morning, looking at what the market had to offer. I think there were a few sub $20,000 US on the market available that were pretty honest. Again, you have to look. I'm not going to give you all the details, but I mean, certain private owners do have those watches for a while. They've been trying to sell them. They started at really high prices. And overall, when people are tired or they need the money, you kind of feel it, and you feel the drop in the price that has been, ongoing for a while. And that's maybe when you might want to hit them with the proper offer that makes sense for you. So I'd say they're really great watches. I would never not have one in my collection, and I hope you do too. If you did like what I had to say about them, please subscribe, hit the like, and we'll see each other on Saturday for the next video. Thank you guys. Have a great week.